What is going on, everybody? So recently I picked up the Meta Quest 3, and I've had a Quest 2 since it was initially released. So the whole concept of portable VR isn't exactly new to me. And in this review, I'm going to make it a little more constructed and just easier to understand my experiences and exactly why I think the Meta Quest 3 isn't really worth an upgrade over the Quest 2. But just to start off the review right away, to give you a better understanding, if you're just coming from a casual tech enthusiast's background or perspective, and you're going into the Meta Quest 3 for the first time, then without a doubt, the Meta Quest 3 is the most groundbreaking piece of technology on the market, and quite possibly the most ambitious, with its mixed reality features, higher resolution from the Quest 2, and just overall better fidelity with every single title on this portable VR device. Now, the best thing about the Quest 3 is the fact that it's available everywhere at Best Buy. You can just go into a store, pick it up. It's the most easily accessible VR headset on the market. The same goes for the Quest 2. So if you're looking at both and see both prices, you're gonna see a huge price hike with the Quest 3 and start to wonder to yourself, why the heck is it so expensive over the Quest 2, and is it really worth jumping to a price of $500 or even $600? And I recently got the $600 version, and just by me saying that, you can sense my buyer's remorse. It is definitely not worth $600 in my opinion. I've been using a Quest 2 for a long time, and a lot of my time, because I use it to work out as well as just play video games. And I wanted to make a review on the Quest 2 for a very long time, but I thought it wasn't really appropriate to my channel. But here I am talking about the Quest 3, mainly because I just want to let you guys know that with all the upgrades that the Quest 3 offers, I couldn't really notice that much of a difference in terms of resolution, and with most titles, graphical fidelity was pretty much the same. And most of all, the biggest feature available on the Quest 3 is the mixed reality. Now, my experience with mixed reality just right off the bat was very mixed. At my place, I have about 2 rooms, so it's very easy to scan, and the whole room is white mixed with brown, so it's very easy to tell the difference between furniture and wall. But I went to a family member's house, and their walls and furniture were mostly white and yellow, or the mix of that. Now, you could change the bulbs, change the colors, but because a lot of things were the same color, for some reason my Meta Quest 3 just couldn't sense any of the walls, or most of the walls, so I had to draw them in. And that took about 3 to 5 freaking hours to set up that mixed reality. So I had a good experience with the overall invasion game with the little fluffball aliens in any setting really, because all you need is one room. But while setting up multiple rooms, if you don't have definitive different colored furniture and walls, your Quest 3 is most likely not going to sense most of the play space that you're trying to set up. And so automatically setting it up is out of the question. You're going to manually need to set up all of your borders. But even so, there was a huge issue with trying to set up my mixed reality in bigger spaces, especially with spaces that were pretty much the same color. And with most houses and apartments, you're going to get the same colored walls and furniture sometimes. A lot of the times people don't like to think about colors too much, and they just make everything white, which has been most of the case. So the Quest 3 had a huge issue detecting the walls, and there were mirrors on the walls. Once you added some mirrors, it started to be impossible to get my play space to work out to try Aspire 2's mixed reality modes. And yeah, it took me almost 5 hours to set that thing up. So after about 3 hours, I was considering returning the Quest 3, but that was the reason why I bought it, to play it in that space with family members and friends. So in that sense, I could say maybe it was just a house I was in, but a lot of people have the same colored walls and sometimes furnitures. So I think a lot of people are going to run into these mixed reality issues, and I know it's going to get better. But when I pay a premium price of $650 for this device, I expect it to at least sufficiently work with its grand advertised and boasted feature from the start, at least the first few times. This was the 3rd time I used mixed reality, and it gave me so many issues. So in that sense, is mixed reality worth it? Well, if you're paying $500 or $600, no, I don't think so. I think the mixed reality feature is amazing when it does work, but most of the time there are a lot of stuff in the way. And with a game like Aspire 2, you're going to get your goals popping up inside of the wall for no good reason, even while you set up walls, furnitures, and all that. And if you have a kitchen with an island, may God help you, because that's going to be apparently the most complicated thing for the Quest 3 to comprehend. An island in your kitchen. I mean, that's a rather simple setup. I don't know if it's because Meta just doesn't expect people to be above middle class or anything like that, but I think it's a pretty common thing to have an island in your kitchen. So yeah, with all of the basic setup with mixed reality, that was just a giant headache. I just wanted to have fun with family and friends, and it took me way too long to set it up. So with that perspective, I really don't think mixed reality is ready for the big time yet, especially if it can't handle bigger rooms. I believe the Quest 2 could scope and set up to 5 meters or something like that. The area that you can set up with the Quest 2 seemed to be a lot bigger than the Quest 3. So upgrading to the Quest 3, all you're really going to get that's completely different is mixed reality. And with that said, I don't think mixed reality is ready yet. So if you're trying to upgrade for a better play space experience or room scaled experience with mixed reality, I gotta say it's kind of a hit or miss with that feature, at least for me, for almost 5 hours. Now let's go to the resolution. With certain games, the resolution and graphic bump isn't too noticeable, to be honest. So far, there aren't many games that look completely different on Quest 3 compared to Quest 2, from what I've seen. But they have performed better, like with Blades and Sorcery. That was actually a good experience on the Quest 3, opposed to all the clipping and crashing issues on the Quest 2. But the Quest 2 has improved with Blade and Sorcery, so it's not too far off in terms of experience and performance on the Quest 3 compared to the Quest 2. I would say if the Quest 3 was $100 more than the Quest 2, yes, it would be worth it for the performance boost that you get. But you get about 10 to 20 FPS boost, which is good, but is it worth $300 more? No, you can just go to eBay and get a Quest 2 for $200, easy, with accessories included, and you will get a very similar experience in terms of resolution and performance. With games like Pistol Whip, which is one of my favorite games, it makes me feel like John Wick, it also makes me sweat. That game got a resolution and graphics boost and FPS boost on the Quest 3, and I thought it was very smooth and a lot of fun to play, but was it a completely different experience from the Quest 2's version of Pistol Whip? Absolutely not. It was very similar, and you could barely tell the difference if you weren't a tech guy like me. There are certain titles that did get a big graphics boost, and I think the graphics boost is important. But when it comes to resolution and graphics boost, all you can really tell the difference between the Quest 2's graphics and the Quest 3's graphics is the lighting and the shadows, and sometimes the textures. Having better textures is pretty awesome, but if the resolution isn't that much higher, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the Quest 2's graphics and the Quest 3's graphics, in all honesty. Since the resolution isn't that much of a boost, you can tell the differences, and it does look like a different game, but with kind of the same resolution, it doesn't quite look like a different experience. So the resolution boost doesn't help the experience that much. In fact, it hinders the experience most of the time, even while you're using pass-through. Sure, the pass-through has full color, but it's still very grainy, and the resolution is subpar. Similar to Quest 2's pass-through, the only real difference I noticed between the Quest 2 and the Quest 3's pass-through was the color. The Quest 2 was black and white, while the Quest 3 had color. So you're basically just getting a Game Boy Color, opposed to the original Game Boy, which is black and white, or green, whichever that original color was. It's really not a big difference in resolution in terms of pass-through either. I mean, sure, you can look at your phone, and it does look slightly better, but is it too noticeable to the point that you say, wow, this is a huge jump and a different experience entirely? No, not really. It's kind of like 10 or 20% better. And let's not forget that the Quest 3 is having a lot of issues right now. The Quest 2 did not have these kind of issues on release day like the Quest 3 is having. Some people are reporting large white dots and graphic malfunctions with certain popular titles on the Quest 3 that work very well on the Quest 2. So some games that work on the Quest 2 very well either don't work at all or don't work as good on the Meta Quest 3, which is extremely unfortunate, especially if you're paying $650 for an upgrade. And I was lucky because I decided to keep my Quest 2 before I upgraded to the Quest 3 because I had a feeling that it wouldn't be much of a jump in terms of performance compared to how much the system costs. And after some time, I sort of lost interest, mainly because I have a Bobo VR headset for my Quest 2, and I have all these accessories that make the experience so much more comfortable. So while playing on the Quest 3, you're sort of biding time because it costs so much, so most likely you're not going to have any accessories with it, and the manufacturer has to make it on time. So it started pressing on my face and making the experience very uncomfortable, and I started to think, man, I wish I had a Bobo VR. It would have been a perfect experience if it was comfortable as well, but I didn't have any of those accessories because Meta didn't make some of the Meta Quest 3's dimensions the same as the Quest 2's, even though they're kind of the same size because of the padding mechanism on the front. So something like the Bobo VR headset won't work because it's slightly too small for the Meta Quest 3's bands on the side, which I find very unfortunate and very Nintendo Switch-like. The fact that they would change the dimensions in such a small way to enable people to get even more accessories for this thing. I spent about $80 in accessories alone for the Quest 2, and then I spent $650 on the Quest 3, and for the most part, I'm looking to just transfer my accessories from the Quest 2 to the Quest 3. So that was kind of a jarring revelation to me, the fact that I had to rebuy every accessory for the Meta Quest 3 as well. And then I started to think, was it really worth it to upgrade to about 20% more of everything with a mixed reality feature, all to get accessories again? And in that moment, I came to the realization that the Quest 2 really wasn't all that worse, and I had all the accessories for it already. So for me personally, in terms of all that money you're going to spend on the Quest 3 and all the issues it's having alone, I don't think it's worth upgrading. But there are even more reasons why you shouldn't upgrade, and that is the deal breaker. Now, the number one reason why you shouldn't upgrade to the Quest 3 if you have a Quest 2 is the battery life. This thing really doesn't last that long, especially if you're playing mixed reality. It's using two pieces of hardware on the device at the same time, so the battery's just going to last like an hour and 45 minutes, which is unacceptable. I had to charge this thing about 5 times in one day. Sometimes I feel like it lasts less than an hour and 30 minutes, especially while using mixed reality. And it's crazy because that's such a staple feature on the device, and it sucks up so much battery. I know they're going to optimize it even more, but again, it is $650. I expect them to just make it work from day one and for it to be ready. And along with the battery life, there are low lighting issues and sensory issues with the Quest 3. While I was trying to scan a very brightly lit room, for some reason in the headset, the room didn't look bright at all, and it just couldn't sense most of the play space. You need to have some kind of professional lighting in your room just for the Quest 3 to look appropriately lit in pass-through or to sense everything in your room. It's like the Quest 3 came with glaucoma or something. But I didn't have nothing but negative experiences. Obviously, the mixed reality was great 50% of the time, and playing Aspire 2, the graphics looked amazing and a good amount better than the Quest 2's graphics. You can see tiny little details that you wouldn't on the Quest 2. I would say the Quest 3 is a lot more immersive in terms of graphics, fidelity, performance. You're not going to get any frame skips here and there with the Quest 3. It is a lot more powerful, but with great power comes a lot of battery usage. And there are lower fidelity modes that will enable your Quest 3 to last just as long as the Quest 2. But I don't know why they didn't just put a bigger battery in there for it to last just as long as the Quest 2 with better performance. So basically, you're just overclocking a Quest 2, because there's an option, an app that you can use with the Quest 2 to raise the resolution and the graphics. So basically overclocking the Quest 2, but it doesn't last as long. It bumps down the battery life by about 20 to 30 minutes, which is basically the Quest 3's battery life. So if you want better graphics with your Quest 2, or about 10 to 20% better resolution, like what the Quest 3 has, just get the application SideQuest and add a bunch of mods to your Quest 2, and you'll have a very similar time with it. If you even notice resolution differences and graphic differences, most likely you're going to know about SideQuest. You're going to know about all of these third-party applications that you can use with your Meta Quest 2 anyway to make it have better resolution and better graphics. And like I said, the Meta Quest 3 doesn't have a polar opposite difference in fidelity or performance. So with that said, you may as well just use the Quest 2 and overclock that, because there is actually a fan in the Quest 2 and I never hear it. But when I use the Quest 3, the fan just revs up right away. So the Quest 3 definitely gets a lot hotter than the Quest 2 does. That's if the Quest 2 gets hot at all. So while overclocking the Quest 2, you're going to hear the fan, but it's pretty much the same experience with the Quest 3 right out the box. And of course, you can overclock the Quest 3 a little more, but I really think that they're pushing the Quest 3 to its very limits from the start. And overclocking that system may prove to minimize its life expectancy a lot more than the Quest 2. But all in all, I really can't recommend the Quest 3, specifically if you're upgrading from the Quest 2. You're really not going to be able to tell much of a difference in terms of graphics performance with most titles. And if you already have accessories, which most people do with your Quest 2, you're not going to want to buy even more accessories for something that's 20 to even maximum 30% better performance and fidelity than its predecessor. It's really not that much of a big jump, and mixed reality just didn't serve me very well or useful, and it was the main reason why I bought the Quest 3, unfortunately. But I can see virtual reality enthusiasts picking this thing up. It is still a crap ton of money to spend on something that looks about 30% better with an experimental feature. But if you have the money, I do recommend picking up a Quest 3 if you haven't picked up a Quest 2. But if you only have about $200 to spend, there is absolutely no reason to pick up a Quest 3 over the Quest 2. Like a lot of these reviewers are saying, and I'll reiterate, you do not need to upgrade from a Quest 2 to the Quest 3. It is really not worth it. As of right now anyway. Especially if you just want a portable headset and you don't want to spend a lot of money, then pick up a Quest 2. It is so good. The Meta Quest 2 is by far the most underrated piece of hardware ever. If I were to give a score to the Meta Quest 2 and the Meta Quest 3, I would give the Meta Quest 2 a 10 out of 10 because it blew my expectations out of the water and it lasted so long and I'm still using it and the experience still feels fresh. I would give the Meta Quest 3 a 7 in terms of expectation. They should have kept this thing in the oven a little longer. They could have possibly added a better battery that could even match up to the Quest 2's battery, and given the price, it really isn't worth it. So the Quest 3 would sadly have a 7 out of 10 or even a 6.5 out of 10 if I was being very specific. I really wasn't that impressed with it, and especially with the battery life. I think they have a lot of work to do in terms of optimization with the Quest 3 because there are a lot of games that just aren't working right. And apparently when you have low storage, you see a lot of white dots and graphical glitches with your games. Not sure what that's all about. I haven't experienced it, but there have been some graphical glitches and crashes and a bunch of flashing when I simply try to go into the store from a game. There have been a lot more glitches with the Quest 3 in just a couple weeks than there have been with my years that I've spent with the Quest 2. The Quest 2 is just a more well-refined piece of hardware for its purpose, while the Meta Quest 3 is ambitious. Every now and then with ambitious hardware, it just doesn't meet expectation. And unfortunately, that's where the Meta Quest 3 lies. So yeah, have you picked up a Meta Quest 3? And if you have a Meta Quest 2, how do you think the two compare? Was it worth the upgrade or the future-proofing? I mean, it does come with a game, but still, I mean, the game that Quest 2 came with was Resident Evil 4. So that's kind of hard to beat. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a good one. Later.